when I started, that was 18 clicks a customer had to go through. Drop down menus, pick your product. We have a lot of products. It was confusing. It would cause missed routes, etc.
Yep.
Now we've got it down through technology where it's just a description box.
Once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Experience Podcast with me, Alex Turkovich. So glad you could join us here today and every week as we explore how digital can help enhance the customer and employee experience. My goal is to share what my guests and I have learned over the years so that you can get the insights that you need to evolve your own digital programs. If you'd like more info, need to get in touch, or sign up for the weekly companion newsletter that has additional articles and resources in it, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. For now, let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Digital CX Podcast. This is Alex Turkovich. So glad you're back this week and every week as we talk about all things digital in CX. I have a phenomenal guest lined up for you today in Bernard Slowey, who has the distinction of being, I think, the only person I know of, you can feel free to correct me here, but the only person that I know of that holds a VP level role that is titled Digital CS. Yeah, he's the VP of Digital CS at Salesforce. So we've talked to a lot of founders. We've talked to a lot of early stage folks. Now we get the opportunity to peek inside the digital program of a large organization such as Salesforce. If you look up Bernard in LinkedIn, you'll see he has quite the pedigree, spent some time in Microsoft, AOL even, and has written a lot of great things also on LinkedIn about, like one of the articles is 6 things I learned at Microsoft. It's all about, discomfort and being, it's okay to be scared and those kinds of things. Really, really great and insightful work. In this episode, we do talk about at length what digital CS looks like at Salesforce, how they're utilizing AI, the kinds of things that they're doing, which is super cool to get an insight to. So please enjoy this episode with Bernard Slowey of Salesforce, because I sure did. Oh, man. But hey, welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you. It's been a little while in the making, and we've kind of been chatting back and forth a little bit, but I'm extremely pleased that you're here. I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you might be the only VP level digital CS role I've heard of. Are there others among you?
It's interesting because I feel like it's really grown as a function over the last kind of year or two. It's like I hear it everywhere now, and I see it in so many places. Congratulations, you're doing a podcast on it, but I still don't know if there's many leadership roles on it. If you read Gartner and how they recommend success organizations should be set up, they're all saying it now. You should have someone who leads it, and I think what tends to happen is it's buried down in companies. It's part of people's day jobs. Is you're doing this, but you should think about this digital thing, and so you need to have the right level of leadership and the right roles and function to be really serious about it. So I feel like maybe I am unique.
I think
there's not too many out there.
There are lots of directors, some senior directors. There's tons of managers with the digital CS moniker, obviously a lot of individual contributors, and I feel like there's a lot of digital functions that are buried under the ops umbrella as well.
100%.
Yeah, awesome. You're a unicorn. Congratulations.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a great thing. It's joking. A great thing. Yeah. So you run digital at Salesforce, so that's obviously fantastic. I know you spent a lot of time at Microsoft. You spent some time at AOL, which is something you don't see every day.
Yeah.
And was that kind of like your first big boy job?
That was when I was in college, actually. I went to college in Waterford in Ireland, and AOL had a call center next door to the college. And so I worked there in the evenings when I was in college. And then when I finished college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so AOL offered me a kind of a full-time job then as a technical trainer, which was amazing. I actually got to spend a couple of months in India with them. But it was very interesting because they were obviously on their way down. It was it's very interesting to be working for a company that was just scrambling to stay alive. The internet was happening around them. Nobody wanted to be in this walled garden anymore. But I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot from AOL. And I always tell people, I think having jobs where you're directly interacting with customers, like is so good for your growth when you're younger.
Yep.
I worked in restaurants, directly serving people. AOL, I was talking to customers over a phone, trying to describe how to do things when you can't see their screen and they can't see you. It's funny when I think back on it, but I just think that direct customer interaction, it still grounds me today. Like I think back to that of like what it's like when you're a customer trying to do these things,
I do. And I love that you brought up kind of the service industry, because I feel like everybody should spend at least some time in hospitality,
Totally.
service, restaurants, whatever, because you see the
Totally.
best and the worst in people.
Totally. Yeah, I got a little 7-year-old boy, and when he's old enough, I'll make sure he gets a job working in a restaurant because you learn so much from it. You learn so much from it.
Right. Yeah. Was AOL still shipping out CDs at that time?
Yeah. There used to be like, I remember there was like websites on what to do with AOL CDs.
Yeah, totally.
There was like so many of them would be shipped out. But yeah, like, and it was interesting because around the time they just partnered with BT. So they were actually in the UK. I was supporting UK customers, and British Telecom were launching broadband. And so like that was like AOL with broadband, it's like, I think I'm dating myself here now, but like that was the time, was helping people set up their modems and troubleshoot connection issues and all of that sort of fun stuff. So it was hilarious.
Yeah, it's amazing. We one of my kind of companies that I worked for a while, Big Commerce, Steve Case was a big investor or whatever.
Okay.
He'd come around the office every once in a while, and we would be like joking, like we'd give him back his CDs or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in an era where, we went to college right around that time, and we used those as coasters and, all kinds of stuff. So you spent a bunch of time at Microsoft, and I feel like that's kind of where you came up, so to speak. And you even, in a LinkedIn stalking that I did do, you wrote a few articles about your time at Microsoft and some of the things that you've learned there, which I thought was really insightful. I think one of the things that you wrote about specifically was being comfortable with discomfort, which is something that I feel like serves us really well in digital, because like we're still, we're riding the front edge of this wave of, digitizing the customer experience and whatnot. So, but I thought that was quite poignant. What was I guess if you had to look back on your years at Microsoft, like what, had to write a few sentences about it, like what would be your main takeaways?
Yeah, I was very lucky. I think I was like 14 or 15 years at Microsoft. And so I feel like I grew up at Microsoft from a career perspective, definitely. And I was there when Ballmer took over, so I was there for the Ballmer years, which was not the greatest time to be at Microsoft. And Windows Vista, if anyone can remember that, like I was in Windows support, and so that wasn't the greatest OS that was ever released.
I worked at Dell in sales. I had to sell it. Yeah.
You had to sell it. Yeah. So yeah. But I was there when Satya Nadella took over, so it was just amazing to be part of that and to watch he transform that company. It was just incredible. It's incredible when you see how well they're doing now. I think everyone thought they were going to be the next IBM at one point in time, and so he just transformed it. So I feel very lucky to have developed there as a leader, as a manager, I just got this great training, I feel like, in everything I did, and watching him and learning from him. Like he talks a lot about how Microsoft used to have this very fixed mindset. It's like, we know it all. We know how to do these things. We don't talk to you. And you really change it. I think there was this book behind me, hit refresh, to this growth mindset, of like, hey, we don't have all the answers. We should be asking questions. We should be deeper with our customers. And so I just took so much from Microsoft. I just feel like I was really lucky to be there at the time when he came in. And so I saw it go from the bad to what he did, it was incredible, really incredible.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, and now you're, at Salesforce. You've been there a little bit, leading digital. And, one of the things that I do ask all of my guests on the show, because everybody invariably has a slightly different twist and definition on it.
Yeah.
Is like, what would be your definition of digital CS if you had to describe it to somebody who didn't know?
I knew you were going to ask me this, so I actually took a little bit of time trying to write it down. I often find with people, like, they get too complex with things, they write things in a way that's very hard for people to understand. So at the simplest, I think about it like this. The digital customer success is the use of technology and data to enhance the digital experience for your customers to ensure they achieve their desired outcomes. That's how I think about it. Like, that's what it is. It's using technology, it's using data, and making sure your customers get what they want.
Yeah. It's put very simply and beautifully. It's so true. Like, and I think, one of the keys there is the data element of it, which is
Yeah.
monumental.
Yeah. 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 100%. That's a lot. I can talk about what we do at Salesforce there,
Yeah.
but like 100%. And, like if I just reflect back onto Microsoft for a minute, like, and how I'm doing what I'm doing today, but like I used to lead Windows support for Microsoft. It was like, 3,000 support engineers, 132
Yeah.
markets, so multiple languages, etc. And I used to talk about like, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to contact support.
Yeah.
And nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to talk to a success manager, right? That's just the reality of like, they're going to go to Google, they're going to search, they're going to try and solve themselves. And if they can't, then they're probably going to go to that human. And that's what digital customer success is
Yeah.
all about. Like, we created a function in Microsoft. I moved over from Windows to run that for Microsoft, was having people whose day job wake up in the morning thinking about, how do I improve that digital self-service experience?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. Because then you're satisfying your customers. Because by the time they've gone online, they've tried something, by the time I get through to that human being, whoever it is, CSM, architect, support engineer, you're already a little bit pissed off,
Yeah.
excuse my
No.
English, because you've tried to do it and you haven't been able to do
Yep.
it, And so that's what it's all about, is how do you make sure in that moment of truth on digital that you show up well and you solve their problem. That's what it's all about. And it mightn't be a problem. Like, I'll go through our framework maybe with you later and how we think about it at Salesforce. Sometimes it's just they're trying to learn.
Yeah.
They're trying to learn how to do something with your.
Yeah, and I think that you kind of glanced on something that I think is super important when it comes to digital, which is, you're trying to offer the best kind of self-serve modalities and ways to help a customer kind of achieve what it is they want to do, get them the right content at the right time at the right place, all that kind of stuff. You're trying to do that, and the better your data is, and the better your motions are, and the better your insights about your customer are, the more you can serve that up. But the underpinning of that is that, there does need to be a human presence, like on the back end of that. Like, I feel like any healthy digital motion, at least that's the way I go about it. Like, any healthy digital motion should always have a human on the back end ready to either step in and interject, or just to check in post interaction to see how things went, to have the value conversations, not actually, try to get the right article at the right time, but to have those next level conversations that really drive value.
I couldn't agree more. We have these tenets of how we think about our experience. And one of the tenets we talk about is slick handoff to a human. And what we mean by that is, like, there's nothing worse to your scenario of maybe you've done something in digital, right? And then you go and whether it's you engage with chat or you go, and the question you get asked is, what's your problem? Yeah. It's so frustrating, right? Because you've been probably on that company's portal, you've looked at a piece of content, maybe you're in app, right? And so they should like have the telemetry to see what's going on. And the agent or support like starts with, what's your problem? So our whole tenet around slick handoff is we make sure that when you go from digital to a human, that we're given context of Alex, who Alex is, what Alex has done, so that we can start the conversation with, oh, I see you're having this problem and you've done these things. Let me move on to the next step, not starting on steps you've done already yourself, And so that's that tenet for us, is we really think about that handoff from digital to a human.
Man, that's so important, because there's nothing that tanks, customer experience more than just like asking the basic question again.
Again, and then trying to put you through steps you've already done, right? It's like, have you tried this? Yes, I tried it. I followed the article on your portal. Like you should have that context, and that's why, coming back to the definition on data, it's kind of data / telemetry, right? Like, you should have context of the experience of what's happening to your customers. You need that to improve it, whether it's handing it into a human or improving that digital experience. You got to have the data. You got to have the telemetry.
Yeah, you really do. Okay, so let's dive in. Like, what are you doing at Salesforce? So, maybe let's rewind the clock a little bit. Like, what was the scenario you jumped into when you joined Salesforce? I don't know, 3.5 years ago, something like that. And then, how have you built the program over time?
We had different functions. We had customer success. We had customer support. we had training, we'd all of these different functions were separate.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been bringing them functions together now under the umbrella of customer success. So we've support, we've success, we've training services, like as in we offer to our customers, all part of customer success. And so when I joined, that was all separate. And so how that showed up to our customers, and this is the example I always like to give to people, is you show your org seams.
Yeah.
So we had a portal for customer success. So if you want to get success with our products, go here. We had a portal for support, our help portal. We had a portal for training services, Trailhead Academy, Trailhead. We've all these separate portals, right? And it's like these different teams are tasked with this thing, and they go build that thing, and they're like, look at our shiny, beautiful portal on its home screen. And it's all like, as a customer, then you go to Google and you search and you're like, whoa, what do I do? Salesforce? Like, I've all of these different links. And so I've been on, part of our journey is like bringing all of them things together into one unified experience. We're certainly not there. We've got rid of some things. We got rid of our success portal and brought the rest of that into our help portal. And so we've been on a journey of how do we unify these experiences, including in-app, by the way, so that's connected to it. So that's been the big part of my journey, is like starting to kind of clean all that up.
That's great.
Is what I would say, is to clean all that up. And so how we think about that, actually, I'd love to share this with you. So I wrote about this on LinkedIn as well, but we spend a lot of time at Salesforce thinking about what's our framework, like what's our strategy and what's our framework. And we can have this operating model that I won't go into in too much detail, but we have a third pillar in the operating model is what we call our easy and expert experiences. And this is where my team really plays. And what we have is at the center of that, we have our customer journeys. And we've done a lot of research, by the way, on our customer journeys. We used external agencies, etc. And we really came back at our level was there's two journeys that our customers are on. The first journey is education, right? I want to learn about your products. You know, maybe you've just released a new feature and want to learn about that feature. And sometimes people think about onboarding as a separate journey, but we actually think about that as part of education. Part of education. The second journey was resolution. Have a problem, want to get it resolved. And usually the words we heard was quickly. So now two customer journeys are at the center of all of the work my team does, right? Education, resolution, they're at the center. And then we have this kind of 4-quadrant model where over on the right-hand side, we think about the assisted experience, right? So that's like the human tech support, that's the CSM. We think about that as reactive and proactive, right? The reactive is you go through to a support engineer, right? You have a problem, think about them journeys, you go through to a support engineer. On the other side is self-service. And this is where my team, and we think about that in proactive. The example of reactive is you have a problem, you search on Google, you want to land on a piece of content that's going to solve that problem. Proactive is we're alerting Alex that, hey, Alex, you're about to hit like a capacity level or something. So we're getting to you before that issue happens in digital, in app, whatever that might be. So all of our work comes back then. Customer journeys are at the center, education, resolution. And then we're over here thinking about how can we be proactive? So we want to move our volume up from that reactive to proactive so that we're getting ahead of you before you have any problems. And if we do that really well in digital, obviously that starts to drive down the volume over on the right-hand side because less people need to go through to a human.
Yeah, which is huge. And I think the more you can be proactive like that and use the telemetry and the insights that you have about your customer to surface those kinds of, hey, you better look over here, you then become much more of a partner than you would have otherwise. You become, part of really your customer's extended org or set of resources that really help them to operate efficiently versus like being another thing that's in the way of them like making progress and things like that, which is cool. Totally. And I loved what you said earlier about, I'm paraphrasing, but about not showing your customers your org charts because I mean, we've all seen it. You get communications from support that look way different than communications from marketing, than from, product, than from whatever. And so and so not just communications, but the portal element of unifying all that kind of stuff. I see a lot of people moving that way. And, instead of like your onboarding emails shouldn't lead you to like 10 different things. It should be like one or two maybe, right?
Totally. And we're also part of our journey is we've launched something that we call our customer success score, which is we actually share a score with our customer. Like if we're very transparent on like, here's how you're doing on your implementation of Salesforce. And that's available on our help portal. So you can log in if you're a signature customer. It's our highest tier of our success plans. We have signature, premier, and standard. If you're a signature customer, you can log into our help portal and you'll see your success score. And we think about that, it's made up in three elements. One of the things is we're looking at signals related to technical health. So we're seeing how healthy is your implementation of Salesforce. The other thing is we're looking at something called expertise, where we're looking at like how much is your company using things like Trailhead, our learning platform? Like are your teams learning about our products? Because the more you learn about our products, the more effective you're going to be and the more you're going to get out of it. And then the final one we have is adoption, right? And when we're looking at this is we're being very transparent with you. Like you've paid for licenses or you're paying for a consumption service. We want to show you how much you're using that. And we actually now have it at a feature level adoption. So we can say, hey, Alex, you know, you bought Service Cloud and you have these AI features, but your team's not using them. And it was very interesting when we went through the cycle of implementing this. A lot of people got nervous on, are we being too transparent? You know, like telling you you're not using these things you're paying for, but we're giving you this transparency. And what these scores and signals allow us to do is then we have telemetry that can drive our digital experiences. And I'll give you a simple example, right? You've bought Service Cloud, you have these new AI GPT capabilities. We can chat about that a little bit later. We can see you haven't used it. You're paying for it, you're not using it. And so it triggers an email to Alex to say, hey, Alex, there's this great feature here. You're the IT admin at the company. You haven't turned it on. But we also send a similar email to the business sponsor. Why do we do that? Because sometimes IT admins don't necessarily want to turn things on because it can add more complexity to their job. And so we're telling the business sponsor, we're telling the IT admin, and then we're bringing them to relevant content to enable these features. Or for the business sponsor, it's the benefit of these features, right? Because it's a different audience. But then what we're able to see is, did you actually turn it on? So we're able to follow that journey through and see that like through the signal from the CSS, we're automating, we use something called Data Cloud, which manages all of our signals and our telemetry. We're automating that email to you. It's a beautiful email written by our content team with our kind of clean call to action, brings you to relevant content depending on which kind of persona you are. And then we can see, did you turn it on? And that's the power, right? Of like, we can show the ROI then on these digital journeys that Alex is turning this feature on. We can see these emails we sent. And it's a simple example, but I think it's a really powerful example of using telemetry to drive a digital journey.
Yeah, it's an awesome example and one that aligns closely with a lot of things that I've been talking about recently with regards to measuring the efficacy of your program. And really, when you think about it, it's essentially campaign metrics, you know, because you're looking at conversion rates of, you know, we sent this to this cohort of customers and this cohort of customers increased adoption because of XYZ. I mean, it's cause and effect essentially, which is really cool. And, you know, I think a lot of times it's interesting that you're engaging different personas in different ways because to the example that you used, I think a lot of executives don't necessarily know what's being purchased, you know? And so when it comes time to, you know, renewal time or whatever, it's always an unpleasant surprise when, you know, you get to the renewal and there's like, well, you guys didn't really use this module and you didn't really use this, but used the crap out of this. It's like, well, why didn't we use that? Like what, you know, and it always leads to a really negative conversation. And so I love that you are being proactive about engaging the customer in a transparent way about the things that they're not using, because ultimately that's what, you know, that's what drives expansion and upsell but just also protects the renewal.
Yeah, totally, Alex. It's like by the time the renewal comes, there's no surprises, right? And it should be easy for you to renew, you know. And the amazing thing about the customer success score as well is we also give you, think about it like a credit score, right? We're giving you kind of a number back on how you're doing with Salesforce. We also give how peers, like similar kind of, you know, size as you, et cetera, how they're doing. So that allows you as a customer to kind of look at it and go like, okay, you know, let's say it's a 6 out of 10 or whatever it might be, and other customers are 8 or 9. Well, what are they doing? And then we give recommendations. We have an AI model based off the score that actually gives recommendations on our help portal to say, hey, customers like you are doing this thing here, and we'll link them to whatever that might be, a trail on Trailhead or a video. And so it's just allowing them, because we often get asked that question, like when we speak to business sponsors, is like, how do I know I'm getting value out of Salesforce? Like, how do I know I'm getting the best out of it? And that's this transparency on the customer success score. It's available. They can go see it. Our CSMs, when they do, their monthly business reviews, etc., they bring it in, they use it. And so it just drives this full transparency with the customer.
That's so cool. Hey, I want to have a brief chat with you about this show. Did you know that roughly 60% of listeners aren't actually subscribed to the show on whatever platform they're listening to it on? Now, as you know, algorithms love likes, follows, subscribes, comments, all of that kind of stuff. So if you get value out of the content, you listen regularly, and you want to help others to discover the content as well, please go ahead and follow the show, leave a comment, leave a review. Anything that you want to do there really helps us to grow organically as a show. And while you're at it, go sign up for the companion newsletter that goes out every week at digitalcustomersuccess.com. Now, back to the show. I mean, Salesforce is not new to doing this kind of stuff. I'm thinking about the partner network because I spent some time as a leading professional services at a Salesforce partner, and we lived and died by the scorecard in our partner portal. Like it was like, okay, how many certifications do we have among the team, and how many, reviews have we gotten from our customers and things like that. And so it always was, I felt like, an amazing way to drive accountability among the partner network. And I almost feel like this does the same kind of thing, like driving accountability without like, the partner network can be a little bit more like, pushy about stuff and making sure that, partners are held accountable or whatever. But like on the customer facing side, it's like, look, here's how you're doing. If you want to improve, here's the path to get there, and we'll hold your hand as much as possible. So
a lot of times you're right, different companies kind of have, models, framework, scores, but what we've pushed really hard on is it's not internal metrics. Like, of course we care about things like adoption and stuff, but we've worked really hard on like, what metrics do our customers want to see to know, are they getting the best out of Salesforce? And so that's why that transparency again is like, we've worked really hard not to be like, these are the metrics we care about. It's like, these are the metrics you should care about to make sure you're getting the best out of your investment.
So I think AI is a huge part of that, as you've pointed out a couple times. And obviously artificial intelligence is all the rage these days. And there's any number of, interesting, amazing solutions that are popping up out there. I'd love to get a sense from you how Salesforce is approaching AI, maybe on two fronts. Like one is the customer facing element, like all the things that are being surfaced within product, but then also I'd love to hear how your team is using it.
Yeah. So I guess like, I don't know how long, I think I'm 25, 30 years in this industry. And I do feel like we're at a moment in time that technology is going to really transform what we do. But what I will say is, I think some companies rushed in too fast without really understanding some of the risks, etc., related to it, like hallucinations, etc., from some of these things back. So we've been, I would say, we've been making sure we feel really good about it when we're going customer facing. And so I'm lucky I work at Salesforce, and I'm actually a customer of Salesforce. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but I use our Salesforce products. We often talk about being customer zero, like our help portal is on, Experience Cloud. We're using an Einstein Service Agent. We're getting ready to launch that. I'll talk about that in a minute. So I get to use our own products. And so I spend a lot of time, me and my team do, with our, our product and engineering teams, giving them direct feedback. And because they want to use us as like the example for other companies, and look how we're doing it ourselves. So from a customer facing perspective, there's two things I get excited about. We have something called search answers, which is when you log onto our portal and you search for things, rather than just giving a traditional list of URLs, which we still do, we're giving you a generated response. If we get enough in the keywords that you put in, we're generating the response back to you. And so that, like, you can still go into the article if you want to, but we're just bringing the relevant piece to you and saying, Alex, this is what you were looking for. And that's cool. But where I get really excited is Einstein Service Agent. And so we're working to launch this. We just announced it actually in the last week or two. And we're working to launch it ourselves over the next probably, I would say maybe month or two, and maybe a little bit longer on our portal. And why this is so powerful is like I've been involved with bots before, right? And I think most of the time they're useless.
Yeah.
Like I think you've been on like someone's portal where you try and engage with the bot and it's like, oh my God, this is so frustrating. Coming back to your point of getting through to the human, it's like, just let me get past you, you know?
Agent.
And so, and agent. It's like when you used to hold down the buttons to get through IVRs. But what was the problem with them? They're predefined, right? Someone has to sit down and write a script, basically. If this, then that, if this, then that. And if you asked it something that was outside of that predefined list of topics, blah, it just fails, right? They're incredibly frustrating. So it's very hard, like, to try and get a bot to a level where you feel confident that it's going to solve a lot of why your customers are coming to you. So Einstein Service Agent, so there's two things I really love about it. So the first thing is it's powered by something called our knowledge object. So it has an out-of-box LLM. And what we're able to do is we're able to feed all of our content. So all of our content that exists on our external facing portals, knowledge articles, product documentation into this LLM. And then what it's doing is it's using OpenAI, the latest model they have, but we go through something called a trust layer, right? So Salesforce has built this trust layer so that we're not sending, information across to OpenAI that we don't want to send, etc. It also looks at things like toxicity, excuse my English, and hallucinations, etc. And so we feel really good then on the response that's coming back because it's trained on our compass of content. Right. And it's going through our trust layer. And so we feel really confident. And so we're testing it right now. And how we're testing it was we took, I think it's over 650 support topics that our customers directly type in our case submission page. So we're taking the exact language that they put in. And then we're putting that into the model. And we have our support engineers and CSMs actually looking at the response and validating it. And I think we're seeing, like, without even tweaking the model, we're seeing about a 70-75% accuracy.
That's great.
And that's incredible, really good, right? Because we know we need to tweak the model and do some things, and it's identified some content gaps for us. But like we feel so confident. What we'll do then is, like, imagine when you land on our portal, there'll always be a little icon for Einstein. So you can still, like, read a document, you've searched on Google, it's brought you to that page, but you'll be able to engage an Einstein Service Agent in Conversational. And then what we're also building as part of that, it has this thing called custom actions where you can build your own actions, is the ability, coming back to our conversation earlier on, to easily go to the human. So you engage with Einstein Service Agent, maybe it's not giving you what you want to need, and you say, I want to create a case. And then it will automatically create the case for you. It will feed you into chat. So the chat agent, if you want chat, just comes into that flow with you and starts chatting with you. Or it just creates the case and someone will contact you back in whatever that SLA is.
That's cool. That's amazing. Really cool stuff. And I hear you on the hallucinations front. I mean, if I had $1 for every time ChatGPT lied to me, I'd be in Hawaii.
But what happened was a lot of companies went live and like, this is amazing, let's use it and go live. And, it's trained on the internet, so like you're getting, things from Reddit or whatever it might be. And it's amazing. Don't get me wrong. The technology is incredible, but the key is making sure for an LLM, it's what's it trained on. And where we get even more excited, right? That's structured data, right? All of that content, etc. But we're going to we have this incredible product called Data Cloud that allows us to take unstructured data. So think about things like chat transcripts in our community, right? Community posts, etc., and feed it into Data Cloud. And then we'll attach that, being probably better technology language than that, into Einstein Service Agent. So it'll start to use not just content, but it starts to use unstructured content as well on how it solves your answer. And what's also very powerful there, it's connected to everything we know about Alex, right? So we could start that bot conversation with, hey, Alex, thank you for being an MVP at Salesforce. You know what I mean? So it becomes personal. It's not just this, like, me engaging with a bot. It's a personal. It knows stuff about me. It knows what you've been doing in the product, not in a creepy way. It's like, it's stuff that we should know about you to make it a more personalized experience. So that's where I think it's going to be a game changer for us. I really do.
That's huge. Yeah, I love it. And I would imagine that also has huge implications for internal team members too. Because if you're engaged with
Yeah,
a customer and, if you're on the phone with a customer, there's no reason why you couldn't use that same thing or that same technology to like help you, serve up answers to questions that you may not know, right?
totally. We're already
Hmm.
using some of our AI capabilities in the human interactions. Like, a lot of our cases come through our case submission portal. It's kind of like a web to email. It comes in
Hmm.
as an email to our support engineer. And so we're already using like our first response. We're able to use this recommended response where it's able to say to the agent,
Yeah.
hey, here's what you should write back. And the agent can change that. They can add different information into it, but it starts the job for
Right.
them. And the same with chat, right? We're coming back to the agent saying this is the
Yeah.
response. The agent can literally just hit enter and respond, or they can edit
Yeah.
it. And these are features that we're offering now in Service Cloud for our customers. And again, we're customer
Yeah.
zero. We're using these things, we're testing them,
Yeah.
we're giving feedback to our engineering teams on how to improve. So it's pretty amazing when you watch some of these features in action.
Totally. Wait, obviously, you don't have to give away like any proprietary information here or anything, but I'm curious what the back end of all this looks like. Like, is this homegrown, or is this an amalgam of? I mean, OpenAI obviously is the GPT portion of it, but is this amalgam of a couple of different vendors that you're using to stitch together, or just give me a sense of
No,
that.
all
Yeah.
homegrown. Again, the advantage I have, Salesforce has this amazing product called Service
Yeah.
Cloud. All of our support engineers, etc., live in Service
Yep.
Cloud. These AI capabilities are being lit up by our Service Cloud product team, and so I have this. I'm lucky.
Yeah.
When I challenge my team. It's not that we don't use, like, we have this
Yeah.
exchange. Lots of partners,
Sure.
etc., have lots of applications up on that. Like, for example, when you search on our portal that's powered by a company called
Hmm.
Coveo, they're an App Exchange partner. So I'm always happy to use, App Exchange partners where it makes sense in our experience. But I always challenge my team of like, we should use Salesforce wherever we
Yeah.
can, because then we're going to help improve our products and it helps our sales
Yeah.
team. Right? Look how we're doing it
Yeah.
ourselves. Look how Salesforce does it. We've this massive ecosystem, customers, partners, and we're able to support them through Salesforce product. It's a
Yeah.
win. But I'll always use the best that's out
Yeah.
there. If ours isn't good enough, then we'll look at what's out there inside App
Yeah,
Exchange.
yeah, exactly. That's cool. This may be kind of a two-parter, but I'm curious as to what I mean, obviously you're on the cusp of the launch with Einstein, which is massively exciting, really cool stuff. But what does 2 or 3 years from now look like? And are you thinking that far ahead in terms of CX? And then also kind of related to that, are there like digital motions you've seen like out in the wild where you're like, oh, that's cool, we got to go do that?
I'll answer both of them in time. So where do I see it going? So I'm going to kind of rewind a little bit and then tell you where we'll go in the future. So we have, I think, about 87 to 90% of our support volume comes to our case submission process on our help
Yeah.
portal. When I started, that was 18 clicks a customer had to go through. Drop down menus, pick your product. We have a lot of products. It was confusing. It would cause
Yep.
misroutes, etc.
Yep.
Now we've got it down through technology where it's just a description box, right? You type in your problem. We use an AI classification model looking at Data Cloud, and we can see Alex uses these products based on what we typed in. We think this is your
Hmm.
problem. So we give you 3 recommendations, and I think we're like 96% accuracy on the first one. So
Cool.
eventually we'll get it down to just
Yeah.
one. So you select that, and within 3 or 4 clicks, you submitted your
Yep.
case. And that's really important to us. Coming back to what I said about that easy and expert experience, we want to make it easy for you to go from digital to a human. And case submission is a perfect example of that. Like, I get so frustrated sometimes
Hmm.
when I go through companies when I'm trying to submit a case. Why am I telling you this? Because I believe what will happen is we're going to move into this world where it's just all going to be conversational, right? Well, I imagine that you land on our portal, and our portal basically is Einstein. It's just going to start with the question, Alex, why are you
Yeah.
here? And then it's going to be a conversation that you're going to have. If you want to create a case, it will create the case for you. We'll have no more case submission page in the future. If you want to get great onboarding documentation, and it will also be within, I should have said this earlier on, the same experience will be within app.
Mm.
right? So I can engage with Einstein Service Agent when I'm in the application. I can engage with it when I'm in the portal. It knows who I am. So everything becomes conversational through technology. And again, seamless handoff to a human when you get there. But that's it's like that Google experience. It's that white box. Why are you
Yeah.
here? What do you
Yeah.
want? And then we'll figure out everything that we need for you based on our data, using on Data Cloud, and make sure it's a personalized experience for you.
Yeah. I think the implications of that are massive, because you're no longer having to direct customers or users, let's call it like, the classic example of somebody just joined the company, they're a brand new Salesforce user, they don't know what's going on, and so you're having
Yeah.
to direct them to Trailhead, or you're having to direct them to,
Yeah.
whatever the onboarding experience is. And if you flip the script and make all that stuff conversational, then all of a sudden, well, guess what? It knows you're a new user. It's likely to just start having a conversation with you on, what you do, what your job function is, and what are the most important things that you need to like understand as you onboard on this new company, and those kinds of things. But I think the conversational element of that kind of flips the script, where you're no longer having to curate stuff, and you're no longer having to
Yeah.
provide that direction. We think back to, the 90s and the early 2000s, where everything,
We're going back to AOL.
yeah, like
But
links and
the other
clicks were the thing.
is it won't just be text, it will be
Mm-hmm.
voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you could imagine the power of, just like me and you are having a
Yep.
conversation, right? That, I can, because you've seen, like you saw, OpenAI, one of their last presentations they did, it was very impressive where they showed the voice
Yep.
capability. And so, you'll have the choice, text or voice. But again, it'll all be powered by this, models in the back end with the LLM, your data,
Yep.
etc. And so I just think a lot of the complexity goes
Yeah.
away.
I've been using the crap out of that. Like, walks are my way to like clear my head, think about a problem that I'm facing, or like some kind of thing at work in a very deep way. And it used to be that 9 times out of 10, I would stop every few minutes and just like take a note in my notepad or whatever, and then come back and try to decipher what I wrote with my sweaty hands. But now I've just been using ChatGPT and literally talking to it through my headphones as I'm walking, and it helps me like talk through. It's almost like a therapist in a way, but it's
Yeah.
helping me like talk through these problems and give me suggestions. And then when I get back to my desk, I just look back at the transcript of the chat, and it was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's so cool.
It's amazing.
It has changed the way I work, like fundamentally changed the
Yeah.
way I work. And
Yeah.
it's odd. I find it odd to say this, but I'm grateful for it. Like, I can't remember the last time I could say I was truly like grateful for a piece of technology.
Yeah, it was funny. I was having this conversation with a friend recently. I guess like there's moments in time where you kind of go, wow. Like I remember, Steve Jobs standing up on stage with an
Yep.
iPhone, and you kind of went, wow,
Yeah.
this is going to change
What was it?
everything.
It
And
was
I think it's one of
a
the,
phone, a new iPod, an internet communications
yeah,
device.
yeah, all in one, and you just remember going, wow, and I think we're at one of them moments in time, where, you see some of the things, others, it's not just OpenAI anymore, but like
Yep.
the technology and what that's going to open up. That's what makes me so excited about the space I work in, by the way, because like if anyone should be leveraging these capabilities, it's folks that are in digital customer success,
Totally.
because this is the way. And it comes back to what I said at the very start. Nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to go talk to the
Yeah.
human. They want to try solve it themselves. They want to teach themselves. They want to learn, etc. Right? And so you now have this amazing functionality that's going to make that so much easier for these people. And of course, it's really important that the great human experience is there as well. We have amazing success managers at Salesforce, amazing support engineers. You're always going to continue to have them, but maybe they got to deal with the more gnarly technical problems, because a lot of the how-to education, etc., technology should start to take that away.
Yeah, we had team offsites last week or this week. I don't know what week it is, where and we brought the teams together, and we had a couple breakouts with just the digital team, and a lot of what we talked about was the fact that it's kind of like the Khan Academy model of digital, where we want to serve really meaningful experiences in a digital way and solve the problem digitally, and reserve the human interaction for that next level of delivering value.
Totally. Totally.
I think there's real power in reaching out to the customer after they've had this, interaction, and just doing a check-in saying, hey, did that work for you? Is there anything else you
Yeah.
need? Like what's your next biggest hurdle that you're tackling, and how can we help you? Because it removes that kind of level of transactional interaction and turns it into more
Hmm.
of a relationship, thanks to the digital taking the transactional off the table.
Yeah. Yeah. And then digital, like we said, can be more personal.
Yeah.
That knows who Alex
Right.
is, and it thanks Alex, and it says, well done in completing that last trailhead module. It just
Yeah.
becomes a little bit more human
Right.
like in its interaction. It just gets so much more
Yeah.
stronger.
That's super cool. Amazing stuff. What I guess the other part of that question was, have you seen some digital stuff out there that you've engaged with yourself? Like, I see tons of stuff in B2C. Like, B2C is just rich with like really cool digital motions that I've run across
Yeah,
recently.
I always tell, I always like it's always interesting in B2B, because I think B2C leads, because when you're in B2B, there's a lot more regulation, etc., probably, and some
Yep.
things that you have to
Right.
do. But I always look to consumer on my own like learnings of, okay, what are they doing? How can I learn about it? And then B2B just tends to be that little bit further behind. It's like the conversation we're having. It's why it's so important we have the trust layer in what we do, because if we hallucinate back to a customer, it's a lot worse as a B2B than that would be in a B2C
Yeah.
scenario. And so we got to make sure that experience is great, that it's really great, and we feel really good about
Yeah.
it. But yeah, I always it's funny, because when I Microsoft and I moved over to lead digital there, I had an amazing leader that came from Amazon. Gee, if you're listening, thank you. And I always looked like, even back then, like I just think Amazon were so far
Hmm.
ahead in their consumer experiences.
Yeah.
Like it was like whenever I needed a refund, I didn't have to talk to anyone,
No.
right? Because Amazon used the data to say Bernard's got value add as a customer. It's $10. Let's just issue it
That's
to
right.
him. Other companies, I'd have to engage with them and blah, blah, blah. And so like, I feel like Amazon is always like, they're always do such a great job in their experiences. Even now they're using AI, so I can see the recommendation on the product. It's looking at all the comments and giving a summary of the
Yeah.
comments,
Yeah.
and so I just think they make it effortless.
Hmm.
I very rarely have to engage with a human being on the Amazon side. And if I do, it's usually an amazing
It's true.
experience, because they know who I am, they know what I've done, they know I am there. It's very
Hmm.
personalized.
Yeah, that's a definitely good shout out. They've been leading the charge on that, I feel like, forever.
But the
Yeah.
interesting thing, just before you
Yeah.
finish,
Yeah.
but why did they do that, right? It's because Bezos was
Hmm.
obsessed with customer
Yeah.
obsession. They're not doing it like a lot of companies. Like I hate the word deflection,
Hmm.
by the way. I'm on a mission to remove
Yeah.
deflection from people's vocabulary. I hate it. Like I think if you brought a customer in a room and said we deflected you, they'd feel great about that. With Bezos, it was like with Bezos, it was about customer obsession, right?
Hmm.
He knows that customers didn't want to go engage with that human. They wanted it to just happen easily within the product. And so everything Amazon did, it's all about customer
Hmm.
obsession. And that's what's so important in these digital experiences. You have to obsess about the experience for your customer to make it be great, to make it be world class. And that's like what Amazon have done over the years.
Yeah, and I remember when Amazon, I think they used to get a lot of flack about that stuff. Like, how can you be profitable if really hyper focus on like making customers happy at all costs and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Looking back on it, it's like, well, you're making your customers happy. They're
yeah,
going to keep coming back, and they're going to keep coming back, and they're going to keep
exactly.
coming back.
They're going to keep on coming back. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe at the cost of, mom and pop shops all around the world, but we won't go there.
We won't go into that. That's the negative of, yeah. We won't get into
We
that.
won't get into that. Look, I always like to ask a couple of kind of finishing questions. The first is like, I want to know
Sure.
what's in your content diet. What are you paying attention to keep yourself in the know?
Speaking of Amazon, I'm addicted to a podcast called Acquired.
Ooh,
Acquired is in a world where everything seems to be short attention spans and 150 characters. Acquired do 3 to 4 hours deep dive on
cool.
companies. There's two guys, one's in Seattle, one's in San Francisco, and they do. Speaking of Amazon, they've two or three on Amazon. They just released one on Microsoft that was 4 hours long,
Wow.
and so it's like they go deep. They do a ton of
Uh-huh.
research. There's usually only one a month comes
Sure.
out because they do so much
Yeah.
research. And it's the story of the company. And it's like, I feel like you get an MBA every time you listen to it on they talk a lot about Bezos. They give the example where he's in the room and he dials the customer service number because he's looking at a scorecard and they're showing their wait times as green and he's hearing other things. And so he rings the number with the, support leader sitting there, and he looks at his watch and he times it and how quick they answer. And you can imagine the sweat coming out of that support leader in that room. But I learned that from that podcast, so Acquired, I'm the biggest fanboy there is of the Acquired podcast. I've obviously listened to yours too, Alex, so make sure I want to shout out with that one. But if I could recommend one thing, it's Acquired.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any shout outs you would want to give?
I would just give a shout out to my team. Actually, we didn't really get into like the functions. We guess we were talking so much about I have in my team, but like all of what we do at Salesforce, I have an incredible team. When you asked me when I started, like I think I had 4 or 5. We now have about 200 people that are 100% focused on digital customer success. We've engineers, we've product managers, digital program managers, we have UX designers, all waking up every single day thinking, how do I improve the digital experience for our customers? So just a massive shout out to my team and everything they do every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that very much. And also appreciate, the content that you've put out there. I mean, you've written about this stuff and it's there if people want to go write about it. And I always appreciate people that kind of show their work, if you will, which is super cool. So where can people find you and engage with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn tends to be where I am. I find I've spent less and less time on X, aka Twitter these days. I don't know. It seems to be I find myself going down terrible rabbit holes sometimes. So I find LinkedIn is a little bit safer. So LinkedIn, please reach out. I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. And as you said, I've wrote a few things. I wish I wrote more, to be honest. I need to find more time for it because I enjoy it. But they're all up on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, you will find me.
Yeah. Cool. Well, hey, thank you for giving us a glimpse into the life of the only VP of digital CS that we know of. And
hopefully create more roles for other people in the future.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. But really appreciate your insights and sharing what you're doing at Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce has been ahead of the game for a long time when it comes to SaaS because they were the first SaaS. And it's cool to see how you guys are just tackling things like AI and really implementing it in a responsible and meaningful way, which is cool. So,
the other thing just before we finish with Salesforce, one of the reasons I came here and I was excited to come here is, if you talk to Mark Benioff, he will say, I was the first customer success manager in the industry. Because you're right, they were the first SaaS company. Suddenly it became really important on why your customers successful in your product. Because before it was all on-prem, right? We would do a massive deal like Microsoft or whatever, and then they might come back a couple of years later when that renewal was up. And that doesn't work anymore in the SaaS world. So like, that's what I love is Salesforce invented customer success, and so no one knows it better. Can we be better? Of course we can. We're working every day to be better and there's lots we can improve on. But that was one of the big draws for me. I was like, wow, this is the company that created it,
Yeah. Absolutely. The mothership. We used to actually, when I worked for that partner, we used to call it the mothership because it's like, let's go Salesforce.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks again for the time. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy individual and can't wait to share this convo with everybody.
Yeah, really appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you so much. I love that, you're leading the way. You're a unicorn when it comes to the digital customer experience podcast. So thank you so much for doing that. It's great. I love listening in to what other people are doing. So thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital CX Podcast. If you like what we're doing, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below. It really helps us to grow and provide value to a broader audience. You can view the digital customer success definition word map and get more information about the show and some of the other things that we're doing at digitalcustomersuccess.com. This episode was edited by Lifetime Value Media, a media production company founded by our good mutual friend Dylan Young. Lifetime Value aims to serve the content, video, audio production needs of the CS and post-sale community. They're offering services at a steep discount for a limited time, so navigate to lifetimevaluemedia.com, go have a chat with Dylan, and make sure you mention the Digital CX Podcast sent you. I'm Alex Turkovich. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.